"We don't serve mechanics here." The words sliced through the showroom's pristine air, each syllable dripping with practiced disdain. James Matthews felt his calloused hands tighten at his sides, 20 years of automotive expertise suddenly weighing like shame on his oil-stained jacket. Around him, the Ferrari dealership's crystal chandeliers cast judgmental shadows across faces that probably never knew the satisfaction of building something with their own hands. A few customers smirked, their designer suits and luxury watches forming an invisible wall between them and the man who had spent months saving for this moment. In the corner, partially hidden by a gleaming SF-90 Stradale, a figure in a casual black jacket stopped scrolling through his phone. The salesman's patent leather shoes clicked against the marble floor as he circled James like a predator, each step echoing through the showroom. His voice carried just loud enough to reach the small crowd gathering near the Portofino M display. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a used car dealership?" A woman in pearls covered her mouth to hide her amusement, while her companion whispered something that drew knowing chuckles. James had memorized every specification of these cars, could recite the engineering behind each curve and component. He'd rebuilt engines that these people couldn't even name. But here, in this temple of luxury, that knowledge felt as worthless as his savings. The envelope in James's pocket contained every dollar he'd saved for 15 years, each bill a testament to countless late nights and weekend repairs. He'd dreamed of this moment since he first held a wrench, but now those dreams were dissolving in the acid of public humiliation. The salesman opened his mouth for another barb, his audience leaning in expectantly when a quiet voice cut through the tension. "That's a bold statement about service." The figure by the SF-90 stepped forward, and the showroom's atmosphere shifted as recognition dawned. Christian Bale's eyes held the kind of intensity that had made him famous, but today, that intensity had found a new target. The showroom's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as Christian Bale moved through the crowd, his casual attire a stark contrast to the sea of tailored suits. The actor's presence carried the weight of every intense role he'd ever played, from Batman to Patrick Bateman. But this wasn't a performance. His eyes scanned the scene with the methodical focus of someone who had spent decades studying human nature for the screen. The salesman's confident smirk faltered, recognition battling with his professional facade. Around them, phones emerged from designer purses and expensive pockets, their cameras ready to capture whatever was about to unfold. The whispers shifted from mockery of the mechanic to excited murmurs about the celebrity in their midst. Some tried to catch Bale's attention with subtle waves and practiced smiles, but his focus remained locked on the tableau before him. James Matthews stood rooted to the spot, his workman's hands still clutching the envelope in his pocket. The money inside represented more than savings. It was 15 years of dawn starts and midnight finishes, of choosing work over leisure, of knowing every engine and transmission that passed through his garage. He had memorized the specs of each Ferrari model, could explain the evolution of their engineering from the 1947 125S to today's hybrid systems. But in this moment, all that knowledge felt like a foreign language no one here cared to understand. "I couldn't help but overhear," Bale continued, his voice carrying the same intensity that had commanded countless scenes, "about service and who deserves it." He gestured toward the SF-90 Stradale he'd been standing near, its Rosso Corsa paint gleaming under the showroom lights. "That's a remarkable piece of engineering, isn't it? Nearly 1,000 horsepower, if I remember correctly." His eyes moved from the car to James, then to the salesman. "The kind of machine that demands real understanding to appreciate." The salesman straightened his Italian silk tie, attempting to regain his professional composure. "Mr. Bale, it's an honor to have you in our showroom. You're absolutely right about the SF-90. It's a masterpiece of automotive engineering, requiring a certain level of sophistication to truly appreciate. He emphasized the last words with a meaningful glance at James's work-worn jacket. The growing crowd of onlookers had formed a loose semicircle, their phones still raised, capturing every moment. A young woman in a Chanel suit whispered to her companion, "This is going to go viral." She wasn't wrong. The tension in the air was electric, the kind of moment that social media thrived on. The contrast between James's calloused honesty and the salesman's polished disdain had created the perfect storm for what was about to unfold. Bale's approach to the SF-90 was casual, but purposeful, his hand running along the car's sculpted side with genuine appreciation. "You know what I've always found fascinating about these machines?" he asked, directing the question to no one in particular. "It's not just about who can afford them, it's about who understands them." He turned to James, whose envelope still waited in his pocket, 15 years of dreams pressed between paper. "How long have you worked with cars?" Before James could answer, the salesman interjected, "Mr. Bale, I assure you I can tell you everything about this vehicle's specifications and—" "I wasn't asking you," Bale cut him off, the same quiet authority he'd brought to Bruce Wayne, silencing the showroom. The phones captured every second, every shift in expression, every subtle power dynamic at play. The wealthy onlookers, who moments ago had been smirking at James's humiliation, now found themselves unsure which side of history they were about to land on. James cleared his throat, years of expertise fighting against the weight of public scrutiny. 20 years, he said, his voice gaining strength, started with muscle cars, moved to European engines, spent the last decade specializing in Italian sports cars. His hands, bearing the honest marks of his trade, spoke as much truth as his words. The silence that followed wasn't just anticipation. It was the sound of preconceptions beginning to crack. Christian Bale's hand rested on the Ferrari's carbon fiber hood, his fingers tracing the subtle curves that channeled air at speeds most people would never experience. 20 years, he repeated, letting the weight of those words fill the showroom. That's a lot of engines, a lot of problems solved. He turned to the salesman, whose expensive suit suddenly seemed more like costume than clothing. "Tell me, how many engines have you actually worked on?" The salesman's laugh was practiced, defensive. "Mr. Bale, I'm a sales professional. My expertise lies in matching our distinguished clients with their perfect vehicle. I understand the market, the lifestyle, The lifestyle," Bale interrupted, his voice carrying that quiet intensity that had silenced movie theaters worldwide. "Let's talk about lifestyle." He gestured toward James. "This man spends his days bringing machines back to life. He understands every system, every component, every quirk of these engines. When one of your distinguished clients hears a strange noise from their $250,000 investment, who do you think they trust to fix it?" The crowd's phones kept recording, but the smirks had faded. A few of the wealthy onlookers shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering their own mechanics who had saved their precious vehicles from disaster. One man in a bespoke suit actually lowered his phone, recognition flickering across his face as he glanced at his Ferrari key fob. James stood straighter now, his calloused hands no longer hidden in his pockets. The envelope of savings pressed against his chest in his jacket pocket, each bill earned through the very expertise being discussed. The salesman's dismissal had wounded him, but Bale's words were transforming that wound into something else, a quiet pride that no amount of luxury showroom lighting could diminish. "Would you like to know something interesting about this particular model?" James asked, his voice finding its strength. The expertise of 2 decades was about to turn this moment of humiliation into something entirely unexpected. Without waiting for permission, James moved to the SF-90's side, his movements displaying the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours understanding these machines. "The hybrid system in this model isn't just about power or efficiency. It's about solving one of the biggest challenges in Ferrari's history. His hands gestured with precision, mapping invisible systems in the air. They had to overcome the weight of the electric components while maintaining the perfect balance that makes a Ferrari a Ferrari. The salesman started to interject, but Bale raised a hand, silencing him. The actor's eyes were fixed on James, recognizing the same passion he brought to his own craft. The phones kept recording, but now they were capturing something different. Not just a potential viral moment of celebrity intervention, but a masterclass in genuine expertise. The solution, James continued, his voice gaining momentum, is actually visible right here. He pointed to subtle details in the car's design that most would overlook. Every curve, every vent, even the way the chassis is structured, it's all part of a brilliant engineering solution that took years to perfect. The crowd had shifted now, unconsciously moving closer to hear better. Even those who had been smirking earlier were paying attention, their expressions transformed by the pure authenticity of James's knowledge. A young man in an expensive suit whispered to his companion, "My dad's Ferrari was in the shop last month. The mechanic explained something similar about the hybrid system." Bale moved alongside James, his celebrity status temporarily overshadowed by the mechanic's expertise. "You know," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I've played a lot of roles where I had to learn complex skills. The one thing I've learned is that true expertise isn't about what you wear or where you work." He turned to the salesman, whose professional smile had become a brittle mask. It's about understanding something so deeply that it becomes part of who you are. The salesman's composure cracked further as he watched his carefully cultivated showroom dynamic crumble. More customers were entering the dealership now, drawn by the growing crowd and the whispered presence of Christian Bale. But instead of gathering around the actor, they were caught in the gravity of something more compelling, the sight of presumptions being dismantled in real time. "Perhaps," the salesman attempted, adjusting his tie like a shield, "we could discuss the financing options that might be more suitable for someone in your position." The words hung in the air like expired perfume, too late to mask the earlier disdain. James reached into his jacket and withdrew the envelope, its edges worn from months of anticipation. "I've been working on Ferraris for a decade," he said, his voice steady. "Every extra hour, every weekend job, every late-night emergency repair, it all went into this envelope. Not just the money, but the dream of owning something I've helped restore for others so many times." The envelope landed on the SF-90's hood with a quiet but decisive sound. "I'm not here for financing. I'm here to buy." The statement rippled through the crowd, phones capturing the moment when assumptions collided with reality. Bale's smile carried the satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed a perfect scene unfold. "You know what I love about cars like this?" he asked, addressing the entire showroom. "They don't care who drives them. They don't care about designer suits or social status. They care about being understood, being maintained, being respected for what they are, engineering masterpieces." The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation. The salesman stared at the envelope, his worldview visibly realigning. The watching crowd had become part of something larger than a viral moment. They were witnesses to a transformation. Some had already lowered their phones, recognizing that what they were seeing deserved more than social media documentation. The stage was set for what would happen next, but more importantly, a lesson about true value and expertise was about to be delivered in a way that no one in the showroom would ever forget. The manager emerged from his office, drawn by the unusual crowd gathering in his showroom. His arrival added another layer of tension to the scene. Here was someone who could either rectify the situation or make it infinitely worse. He moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone used to handling high-net-worth clients, his expression shifting from professional concern to recognition when he spotted Christian Bale. "Mr. Bale, what an unexpected pleasure," the manager began, but stopped short when he saw the envelope on the hood of the SF-90. His eyes darted between James, the salesman, and the celebrity, reading the room's energy with years of experience in luxury sales. "Perfect timing," Bale said, his voice carrying that quiet authority that had commanded countless scenes. "We were just discussing what makes someone qualified to own a Ferrari." He gestured toward James. "Your colleague here seems to think it's about the suit you wear rather than the knowledge you possess." The salesman stepped forward, attempting to salvage his position. "Sir, I was merely suggesting that our typical clientele—" "Show him," Bale interrupted, nodding to James. "Show them what's in that envelope." James reached for the envelope with steady hands, the kind of steadiness that came from years of performing precision work on complex engines. As he opened it, the crowd leaned in, phones still recording. Inside was not just money, but something else, photographs carefully preserved. "These are all the Ferraris I've restored," James said, laying out the photos one by one on the hood. This 458 Spider that had been written off as unsalvageable. This F12 that other shops said couldn't be fixed. This vintage 308 that everyone said should be scrapped. Each photo told a story of mechanical expertise and dedication, of problems solved and dreams restored. The manager's expression changed as he studied the photos, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Wait, you're Matthews? James Matthews from Superior Performance?" The revelation hit the showroom like a perfectly timed engine stroke. Superior Performance was legendary among serious Ferrari owners in the region, the shop that could solve problems others couldn't touch. The wealthy onlookers who had been smirking earlier now wore expressions of dawning embarrassment. More than a few of them had probably had their own cars saved at that very shop. "The same," James confirmed, his voice steady. "That F12 belongs to Mr. Richardson here." He nodded toward a man in the crowd who had been recording the scene. The man lowered his phone, his face flushed with recognition. "You're the one who figured out the electrical issue when no one else could," Richardson said, stepping forward. "Even the dealership couldn't diagnose it." The last words hung in the air like a verdict. The salesman's face had lost all color, his earlier confidence evaporating as he realized he had just spent the last 20 minutes condescending to someone who was practically royalty in the Ferrari maintenance world. The manager's expression shifted from recognition to barely contained alarm. "Mr. Matthews," the manager said, his tone completely transformed, "I cannot apologize enough for this misunderstanding. Your reputation precedes you. Half the cars in our service department have your signature in their maintenance records." Bale's smile carried a mix of satisfaction and irony. "Interesting how expertise looks different when you know what you're actually looking at," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Makes you wonder how many other people we dismiss based on appearances, doesn't it?" The crowd had grown larger, the story already spreading through social media. But something deeper was happening here. People weren't just witnessing a moment of comeuppance, they were seeing their own prejudices reflected back at them. Several of the well-dressed onlookers had put their phones away, perhaps too uncomfortable with their own initial reactions to keep recording. James picked up the envelope again, but now he held it differently. Not as a supplicant bringing his life savings to fulfill a dream, but as someone who had earned both the money and the right to be there. "I came here today because I believe in these machines," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of genuine expertise. "I've spent my life understanding them, caring for them, bringing them back when others had given up. And today, I wanted to own one, not just to have it, but because I understand what it truly is." The manager stepped forward, physically displacing the humiliated salesman. "Mr. Matthews, please allow me to personally handle your purchase. And I believe we can offer you our specialist pricing program, given your relationship with our service department." It was more than a sale now. It was damage control, recognition, and respect, all rolled into one. Bale watched the scene unfold with the satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed justice being served. "You know what I love about moments like this," he said to the crowd, but his words were clearly meant for a larger audience. "They remind us that real value isn't in what we wear or how we look. It's in what we know, what we can do, and how we treat others." The salesman had backed away, his expensive suit no longer armor, but a symbol of the superficial judgments that had just been so thoroughly dismantled. Some of the phones were still recording, but many had been lowered. Their owners, too, caught up in the moment to worry about social media. "Mr. Matthews," Bale said, extending his hand, "would you mind showing me what makes this SF90 so special? I have a feeling I'd learn more from you than from anyone else in this room." The request wasn't just about the car, it was a public acknowledgement of expertise over appearance, of substance over style. The showroom had become more than a luxury car dealership. It was a stage where a powerful lesson about prejudice, expertise, and true value had played out in front of a live audience, both physical and digital. The next hour transformed the Ferrari showroom into something entirely different from its usual polished showcase. James moved through the space with Christian Bale, explaining the engineering marvels that made each model unique. His hands traced the aerodynamic features with reverence, his voice carrying the passion of someone sharing not just knowledge, but a lifetime of dedication. The crowd had evolved from spectators to students. Even those who owned Ferraris found themselves learning things they'd never known about their own vehicles. The phones that had initially raised to capture a moment of conflict now recorded a masterclass in automotive excellence. The manager had personally brought coffee for James and Bale, his attention to their conversation as keen as any of the onlookers. The humbled salesman had retreated to his desk, watching as his former target commanded the room with expertise that no designer suit could match. Several customers who had witnessed the entire scene were quietly asking the manager about James's shop, their own assumptions about expertise and appearance thoroughly shaken. "People often ask me how I prepare for different roles," Bale mentioned to the group, "but what they're really asking is how to understand something deeply enough to make it real. What we've seen today is what that truly looks like." By late afternoon, the story had spread far beyond the showroom. Social media was ablaze with videos of the encounter, each clip capturing a different aspect of the transformation. The initial confrontation, the revelation of James's identity, the masterful explanation of Ferrari engineering, and Bale's powerful commentary on expertise versus appearance. The manager had not only processed James's purchase of the SF90, but had invited him to host a technical workshop for their VIP clients. "Our customers should understand these machines as well as they appreciate them," he explained, shooting a meaningful glance at the chastened salesman's desk. Several of the original onlookers had scheduled appointments at Superior Performance. Their perspectives shifted from seeing a mechanic's shop as merely a service provider to recognizing it as a temple of expertise. The woman in the Chanel suit, who had predicted the moment would go viral, was now talking about producing a documentary about automotive artisans. "You know what the best part about today was?" Bale asked James as they stood beside the SF90 that would soon be his. "It wasn't just about proving someone wrong. It was about showing everyone what right looks like." He gestured to the gathered crowd, who were still absorbing the lessons of the day. "Some performances change people's minds, but what you did today, that changes how people see the world." As the sun set, casting long shadows through the showroom's windows, James sat in the driver's seat of his new SF90. His calloused hands rested on the steering wheel, feeling the connection between man and machine that he had spent a lifetime understanding. The envelope that had carried his dreams was now empty, but something far more valuable had filled its place, a vindication of every hour spent learning, every night spent working, every moment dedicated to mastering his craft. Behind him, the showroom had returned to its usual quiet elegance, but something fundamental had changed. The manager was already drafting a new policy about customer service and expertise recognition. The viral videos of the day's events had sparked discussions about prejudice, expertise, and the true meaning of luxury across social media platforms worldwide. Christian Bale had left hours ago, but not before ensuring his own Ferrari would be serviced exclusively at superior performance from now on. "Some roles you play," he had said, "and some roles you live. You've mastered the one that matters most, being authentically excellent at what you do." As James started the engine, its purr was more than just mechanical perfection. It was the sound of a dream realized, of expertise recognized, of prejudice overcome. In the end, it wasn't just about buying a Ferrari. It was about proving that true value lies not in appearances or assumptions, but in the dedication, knowledge, and passion that define who we really are.